Zara Thompson's heels clicked against the marble floor as she pushed open the front door of her suburban home, her arms full of grocery bags for the romantic anniversary dinner she'd planned. The house should have been quiet, with soft jazz playing and candles lit throughout the living room. Instead, she heard laughter, music, and voices coming from the backyard. "Brandon?" she called out, setting the bags down in confusion. They'd been married exactly 5 years today, and she'd taken the afternoon off from her consulting firm to prepare their favorite meal. Maybe he'd invited a few friends over to celebrate early. But as she walked through the house toward the sliding glass doors, she saw something that made her blood run cold. Through the windows she could see at least 30 people in their backyard. There were balloons everywhere, but not the romantic red and white she would have expected. These were black and gold, with writing she couldn't quite make out from inside. She opened the sliding door and stepped onto the patio. The conversation stopped. Every face turned toward her, and instead of the warm smiles she expected, she saw a mixture of amusement and pity. "Surprise." Brandon's voice boomed from across the yard. Her husband stood next to a large table covered with a black tablecloth. On it sat a 3-tiered cake with writing that made Zara's knees weak. "Happy Divorce Day." But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the woman standing next to Brandon with her arm wrapped around his waist. Natalie Rivers, a social media influencer with over 2 million followers, was beaming at Zara like this was the most normal thing in the world. She had her phone out, clearly recording everything. "What is this?" Zara managed to whisper, but her voice carried across the suddenly silent yard. Brandon walked toward her, holding a manila envelope. He was grinning like he'd just won the lottery. "Baby, I know this might seem sudden, but I've been thinking. We've grown apart, and I think it's time we both moved on to find real happiness." The guests started murmuring among themselves. Zara recognized some of them: Brandon's co-workers, a few neighbors, and several people she didn't know at all. They were all watching her like she was entertainment. "On our anniversary?" Zara's voice was barely audible. "Well, it seemed like the perfect day for a new beginning," Natalie chimed in, still filming. "Brandon told me you'd understand. You're such a smart, independent woman. You'll bounce back in no time." Zara looked around the yard again. There were decorations everywhere that she now realized were celebrating the end of her marriage. Someone had even hung a banner that read, "Freedom Party 2025. There was a table set up with drinks labeled "Single and Ready to Mingle" and "Bye Bye Marriage Blues." "I don't understand," Zara said, though she was starting to understand perfectly. "You want a divorce?" Brandon opened the envelope and pulled out a thick stack of papers. "I've made this easy for you, Zara. Everything's already filled out. You just need to sign right here and we can both move on with our lives." He handed her a pen, a gold pen that she recognized as the one she'd given him for their first anniversary. The irony wasn't lost on her. "You've been planning this," she said. "It wasn't a question." "For a few months now," Brandon admitted. "Natalie helped me realize that I wasn't truly happy. She showed me what real love could look like." Natalie stepped forward, lowering her phone for a moment. "Zara, I hope there are no hard feelings. Brandon and I never meant for this to happen, but sometimes the heart wants what it wants." "How long?" Zara asked. "How long what?" Brandon looked uncomfortable for the first time. "How long have you been sleeping with her?" The yard went completely silent. Even the music seemed to have stopped. "Zara, please don't make this harder than it needs to be," Brandon said. "Just sign the papers. I'm being generous with the settlement." Zara took the papers and flipped through them quickly. She'd learned to speed read legal documents in her business consulting work. What she saw made her stomach turn. Brandon wasn't just asking for a divorce, he was asking her to sign over her rights to the house, her car, and even her share of their joint bank accounts. "This gives you everything," she said. "I put more into this marriage financially," Brandon said. "It's only fair." That was a lie, and everyone who knew them well knew it. Zara's consulting business had been thriving for the past 3 years. She'd been the primary breadwinner while Brandon struggled to get his real estate development company off the ground. "Sign right there," Natalie said, pointing to a line at the bottom of the last page. She had her phone up again, recording. "This is going to make such great content for my followers. A real, authentic divorce party." Zara looked around at all the faces staring at her. Some looked sympathetic, but most seemed to be enjoying the spectacle. These people had come to watch her marriage end like it was some kind of entertainment. She thought about the 5 years she'd spent with Brandon. The way he'd pursued her relentlessly when they first met. How he'd promised her they'd build an empire together. The late nights she'd worked to help fund his business dreams while he complained that she wasn't supportive enough. And now this. A public humiliation on what should have been their celebration day. Zara took the pen and looked down at the signature line. She could hear Natalie's phone buzzing with notifications as people commented on her livestream. "Just sign it, Zara," Brandon said impatiently. "Stop dragging this out." She put the pen to paper and signed her name with careful, deliberate strokes. Then she handed the papers back to Brandon with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "There," she said. "Happy anniversary to you too, Brandon." The crowd erupted in awkward applause, led by Natalie, who was practically bouncing with excitement. What none of them knew was that Zara had just signed those papers with a special pen she kept in her purse for work, one that used disappearing ink that faded completely within 24 hours. And more importantly, what none of them realized was that Zara Thompson hadn't gotten where she was in business by being naive. She was about to show them what real strategy looked like. Zara stood in the middle of her own backyard, surrounded by people celebrating the end of her marriage, and felt something she hadn't expected: relief. Not because her marriage was over, but because she finally saw Brandon clearly for the first time in years. "Speech. Speech," someone called out from the crowd. Zara turned to see one of Brandon's co-workers raising a beer bottle in the air. Brandon looked at her expectantly. "Come on, Zara. Say something nice. Show everyone how mature you're being about this." The entire party was watching her again. Natalie had her phone aimed directly at Zara's face, probably broadcasting live to thousands of people. The thought of strangers watching her private pain being turned into entertainment made her feel sick. But Zara had spent years learning how to perform under pressure. In her consulting work, she'd faced hostile boardrooms, aggressive investors, and skeptical clients. She knew how to keep her composure when everything inside her was screaming. "Well," she said loud enough for everyone to hear, "I guess all I can say is that today has certainly been educational." A few people laughed nervously. "I've learned that 5 years of marriage can end with a party I never knew was being planned. I've learned that my husband has been making decisions about our future without telling me. And I've learned that there are people who think divorce is something to celebrate like a birthday." Brandon's smile was starting to fade. "Zara? But most importantly," she continued, looking directly at Natalie's camera, "I've learned that sometimes when you think you're losing everything, you're actually being freed from something that was holding you back." She turned to Brandon. "Thank you for this lesson. I hope you and Natalie are very happy together." Without waiting for a response, Zara walked back into the house. She could hear the party continuing behind her, but the energy had definitely shifted. Her calm reaction had clearly not been what Brandon and Natalie were hoping for. Inside, Zara went straight to her home office and locked the door. She pulled out her laptop and started typing furiously. First, she sent an email to her assistant asking her to clear her schedule for the next few days. Then she opened a new document and began making notes about everything she'd observed at the party. Who was there? What they'd said. How long this had clearly been planned. The fact that Natalie had been filming everything for her social media. Most importantly, she started researching the legal documents Brandon had asked her to sign. She photographed each page with her phone before the ink disappeared completely. As she read through them more carefully, her anger turned into something much more focused. These weren't just divorce papers. Brandon was asking her to sign over the house they'd bought together, a house she'd put the down payment on using money from her business. He wanted her car, which was paid for entirely with her earnings. He wanted access to bank accounts that she'd been funding for the past 2 years while his business struggled. But the most interesting part was a clause buried on page 7. Brandon was asking her to waive her rights to any investigation into their joint finances. That was a strange thing to include in a divorce settlement, unless someone had something to hide. Zara opened her business laptop and logged into their joint bank accounts. What she found there made her sit back in her chair and stare at the screen. Over the past 6 months, there had been dozens of transfers from their joint accounts to accounts she'd never seen before. Small amounts at first, then larger ones. The most recent transfer had been just 3 days ago. $25,000 moved to an account labeled NR Holdings. NR. Natalie Rivers. Zara's mind started racing. She pulled up more financial records, credit card statements, and investment accounts. The pattern became clearer with every document she reviewed. Brandon hadn't just been having an affair, he'd been systematically moving their money to accounts she couldn't access. She grabbed her phone and called her best friend Simone. "Zara, how was your anniversary dinner? Did Brandon love the surprise you planned?" "Simone, I need you to come over right now. And I need you to bring your laptop and that contact information for your lawyer friend." "What's wrong? You sound weird." "My husband just threw me a divorce party instead of celebrating our anniversary. And I think he's been stealing money from our joint accounts to fund his affair." There was silence on the other end of the line. "I'm sorry, Did you say he threw you a divorce party? I'll explain everything when you get here. But Simone, I need you to know that I'm not going down without a fight. Brandon thinks he's been clever, but he made one big mistake. What's that? He forgot that I'm really good at finding out where money goes. And he definitely forgot that I have never, ever lost a business negotiation. After hanging up with Simone, Zara spent the next hour documenting everything she could find. She made copies of financial records, took screenshots of bank statements, and created a timeline of when money had been moved. She could still hear the party going on outside. At one point, she heard someone jump into their pool, followed by cheering and laughter. These people were celebrating in her backyard while she discovered the depth of her husband's betrayal. But instead of feeling defeated, Zara felt something she hadn't felt in years: completely motivated. Brandon had underestimated her, and that was going to be his biggest mistake. She thought about the pen she'd used to sign those papers. By tomorrow morning, her signature would have completely faded away, leaving Brandon with worthless documents. But he wouldn't find that out until he tried to file them. More importantly, she now had evidence that Brandon had been moving money without her knowledge or consent. In their state, that was grounds for fraud charges, especially if it could be proven that he'd been planning the divorce while secretly transferring assets. Zara opened a new email and began typing. To whom it may concern, I am seeking legal representation for a complex divorce case involving potential financial fraud and theft. I have substantial documentation and evidence, and I need an attorney who specializes in asset recovery and white-collar crime. Please contact me at your earliest convenience. She sent the email to 3 different law firms, including the one Simone had recommended. Then she sat back and looked around her home office. The walls were covered with awards from her consulting business, photos from successful projects, and certificates from business courses she'd completed over the years. Brandon had forgotten who he was dealing with. He'd gotten so comfortable thinking of her as just his wife that he'd forgotten she was also Zara Thompson, the woman who'd built a 6-figure consulting business from nothing. The woman who'd helped dozens of companies recover from financial disasters and reorganize their assets. The woman who had never lost a fight when she knew she was right. Outside, she could hear the party finally starting to wind down. Cars were leaving and the voices were getting quieter. Soon, Brandon and Natalie would probably come inside, expecting to find her packing her things or crying in the bedroom. Instead, they were going to find someone who was ready for war. The next morning, Zara woke up in the guest room of Simone's apartment with a clear head and a detailed plan. She'd left the house at midnight, after Brandon and Natalie had finally finished their celebration and gone to bed in what used to be Zara's bedroom. She hadn't taken much with her, just her laptop, important documents, and enough clothes for a few days. She wanted Brandon to think she was broken and defeated, at least for now. Coffee? Simone asked, padding into the living room in her pajamas. And are you ready to tell me what the hell happened yesterday? Zara spent the next hour explaining everything, from the moment she'd walked into the divorce party to discovering the transferred money. Simone listened without interrupting, her expression growing more outraged with each detail. I can't believe he filmed it, Simone said when Zara finished. And posted it online for people to see. That's just cruel. Actually, that might work in my favor, Zara said. If this goes to court, having video evidence of how he handled the divorce request could be useful. Zara's phone buzzed with a text message from Brandon. Hope you slept well. When you're ready to talk about logistics, let me know. We can keep this simple if you don't fight me on anything. She showed the message to Simone, who made a disgusted sound. He really thinks you're just going to roll over and let him take everything. Good. Let him think that. At 9 a.m. sharp, Zara's phone rang. It was Gabriel Santos from Santos & Associates, one of the law firms she'd contacted the night before. Miss Thompson? I received your email about legal representation. I have to say your case sounds quite complex. Would you be available to meet this morning? I had a cancellation and I think we should discuss this as soon as possible. An hour later, Zara sat in Gabriel Santos's downtown office, impressed despite herself. The man was younger than she'd expected, probably in his mid-30s, with dark hair and intense brown eyes. His office was modern and organized, with law books lining one wall and certificates covering another. Tell me everything, Gabriel said, pulling out a legal pad. Start from the beginning. Zara walked him through the entire story, from the surprise party to the financial irregularities she'd discovered. Gabriel took notes rapidly, asking sharp questions about dates, amounts, and witnesses. You said you signed the papers with disappearing ink? He asked. Yes. I keep the pen for work situations where I need to mark documents temporarily. The ink fades completely within 24 hours. Gabriel smiled for the first time since they'd started talking. That's brilliant. So legally you never actually signed anything. Exactly. But he doesn't know that yet. And you have documentation of these financial transfers? Zara opened her laptop and showed him the spreadsheets she'd created, along with screenshots of bank statements and credit card records. Gabriel whistled low. This is substantial. If we can prove he was planning the divorce while moving assets, that's financial fraud. The fact that money went to accounts connected to his girlfriend makes it even worse. What are our options? Several. First, we file for divorce on your terms, citing fraud and infidelity. Second, we request a full financial audit of all marital assets. Third, if the evidence supports it, we can pursue criminal fraud charges. Gabriel leaned back in his chair. Miss Thompson, I have to ask, what outcome are you looking for here? Do you want to reconcile, or are you looking for a clean break? I want a clean break, Zara said without hesitation. But I also want justice. He can't be allowed to steal from me and then humiliate me publicly. I want him to face consequences for what he's done. I understand. Now, I need to warn you that this approach will likely get expensive and complicated. Your husband will fight back, especially if he realizes how much evidence you have. Money isn't a problem. My business is doing well, and I have savings he doesn't know about. Zara had been putting money into a separate account for years, originally planning to surprise Brandon with a business investment. Now she was grateful for her caution. Gabriel nodded. Okay. Here's what I recommend we do first. Over the next 2 hours, they developed a comprehensive strategy. Gabriel would immediately file a motion to freeze all joint accounts, preventing Brandon from moving any more money. They would request a full forensic accounting of the marriage's finances. And they would gather more evidence of Brandon's affair and financial misconduct. I also want to subpoena any social media content related to this, Gabriel said. If his girlfriend posted videos of the divorce party, that could be evidence of emotional distress and public humiliation. She live-streamed it, Zara confirmed. It probably has thousands of views by now. Perfect. We can use that. As Zara prepared to leave Gabriel's office, he handed her his business card. Miss Thompson, I have to say, I've been practicing family law for 8 years, and I've never had a client come in with this level of documentation and evidence. Your husband made a serious mistake underestimating you. That's what I'm counting on. That afternoon, Zara returned to her house for the first time since the party. Brandon's car was gone, but she could see evidence of the celebration everywhere: empty bottles in the recycling bin, leftover cake in the refrigerator, and balloon strings scattered across the yard. She went to her home office and found that nothing had been touched. Brandon probably assumed all her important documents were business-related and irrelevant to the divorce. Zara spent the next few hours printing copies of everything she'd need, organizing files, and preparing for what she knew would be a long legal battle. She also did something else. She logged into the social media account she rarely used and searched for Natalie Rivers. What she found made her anger flare again. Natalie had indeed posted multiple videos from the divorce party, with captions like, "Supporting my man through his difficult divorce," and "Sometimes love means making hard choices." The videos had thousands of views and hundreds of comments, most of them praising Natalie for being so mature about a complicated situation. But some of the comments were different. Several people had recognized Zara and were questioning why anyone would film someone's private pain for entertainment. A few people seemed to realize how cruel the whole situation was. Zara screenshotted everything and added it to her evidence file. Her phone buzzed with another text from Brandon. "Stopped by the house but you weren't there. We need to talk about next steps. The sooner we get this finalized, the better for both of us." Zara typed back, "I need a few days to process everything. This is a lot to handle." "I understand. Take your time. But remember, fighting this will only make it harder on both of us." Zara stared at the message for a long moment. Brandon really believed he held all the cards. He thought she was emotionally devastated and financially dependent on him. He was about to learn how wrong he was. 3 days after the divorce party, Zara sat across from Gabriel in a downtown cafe, watching him review the additional evidence she'd gathered. She'd spent the past 72 hours diving deep into Brandon's business dealings, and what she'd found was worse than she'd initially thought. "This is incredible work," Gabriel said, flipping through the folder of documents. "You should consider a career change to forensic accounting." "I've always been good with numbers," Zara replied. "But I've never had such personal motivation to find the truth before." Gabriel pulled out his laptop. "Walk me through what you discovered." Zara opened her own computer and pulled up the detailed spreadsheet she'd created. I started by tracking every financial transaction Brandon made over the past year. The transfers to Natalie's accounts were just the beginning. She pointed to a series of entries highlighted in red. Look at this. Starting 8 months ago, Brandon began moving money from our joint business account into something called Sunset Development LLC. I'd never heard of this company before. Did you find out what Sunset Development is? I did better than that. I found out who owns it. Zara clicked to a new tab on her browser. Sunset Development LLC was registered 6 months ago. The listed owner is Natalie Rivers, but the business address is Brandon's office. Gabriel leaned forward. So he created a fake company using his girlfriend's name to funnel money away from your joint accounts. It gets worse. I looked up the business registration, and Sunset Development is listed as a social media marketing company. But when I checked their supposed client list, half the companies don't exist. Zara pulled up another document. Over the past 6 months, Brandon transferred almost $200,000 from our accounts to Sunset Development for marketing services that were never actually provided. That's embezzlement, Gabriel said grimly. And if he was planning the divorce while doing this, it's also fraud. There's more. Zara opened a new folder on her computer. I contacted some of Brandon's real estate development clients to ask about their marketing expenses. 3 of them told me they've been paying Brandon extra fees for promotional campaigns that they thought were legitimate business expenses. Gabriel was taking notes rapidly. So he was not only stealing from your joint accounts, but also scamming his own clients. And funneling that money to his girlfriend's fake company. Zara sat back in her chair. I also found evidence that they were planning to leave the country. Natalie posted about exciting international opportunities on her social media, and Brandon has been researching property purchases in countries without extradition treaties. You found all of this in 3 days? I didn't sleep much. But Gabriel, there's something else. Something that might be the most important piece of all. Zara pulled up an email thread she'd printed from Brandon's computer. I accessed his email account yesterday. He uses the same password for everything, which is Natalie's birthday. Not very creative. Gabriel raised an eyebrow. Is that legal? It's a shared computer in our house and we've always had access to each other's email accounts. Technically, yes, it's legal. She handed him the printed emails. Read this conversation between Brandon and Natalie from 2 months ago. Gabriel read silently, his expression growing more serious with each line. They were planning to frame you for the financial irregularities. Exactly. Brandon was going to claim that I had been stealing money from our joint accounts to fund my business. He was planning to say that I created Sunset Development myself and that he only found out about it recently. But you have evidence that proves otherwise. I have timestamps, IP addresses, and digital footprints that show every transaction originated from Brandon's devices, not mine. Zara pulled up another file. I also have security camera footage from our home office that shows Brandon working on financial transfers late at night when he thought I was asleep. Gabriel was quiet for a long moment, reviewing all the evidence. Zara, this is one of the most comprehensive fraud cases I've ever seen. You've essentially done the work of our entire investigative team. I'm motivated. I can see that. Now, here's what we're going to do. Gabriel closed his laptop and looked directly at her. We're going to let Brandon think he's winning for a little while longer. I want him to get comfortable and maybe make more mistakes. What do you mean? Tomorrow, I'm going to have you call Brandon and ask to meet with him. You're going to act confused and hurt, like you don't understand the financial aspects of the divorce. You're going to ask him to explain the paperwork to you. Zara frowned. You want me to act helpless? I want you to act like the victim he thinks you are. If he believes you're not suspicious of his financial dealings, he might get overconfident and reveal more information. Gabriel pulled out a small device from his briefcase. I'm also going to ask you to wear a wire to that meeting. If we can get him to admit to any of this on tape, it will make the criminal case much stronger. A wire? Like in the movies? Exactly like in the movies. It's perfectly legal as long as one party to the conversation consents to the recording. Since you'll be consenting, we're covered. Zara felt a thrill of excitement mixed with nervousness. What if he gets suspicious? Brandon has been underestimating you for years. He's not going to suddenly start thinking you're capable of this level of investigation. Gabriel's expression was confident. From everything you've told me about him, he's arrogant and he thinks he's smarter than everyone else. Those are the easiest people to catch. And what about Natalie? We'll deal with her separately. But first, Let's focus on getting Brandon to incriminate himself. They spent the next hour planning exactly what Zara would say during the meeting with Brandon. Gabriel coached her on how to ask leading questions that would encourage Brandon to brag about his plan without making him suspicious. Remember, Gabriel said as they prepared to leave, he thinks he's already won. He thinks you signed those papers and that you're just a hurt, confused wife who doesn't understand business. Use that assumption against him. As Zara walked to her car, she felt more confident than she had in days. For the first time since the divorce party, she felt like she was the one in control. Her phone buzzed with a text from Brandon. Have you thought about our conversation? I really think we should finalize things soon. The longer we wait, the more complicated this gets. Zara smiled as she typed her response. You're right. I'm ready to talk. Can we meet tomorrow? I have some questions about the paperwork, and I'd like you to help me understand everything. Brandon's response came back almost immediately. Of course. I'm glad you're being reasonable about this. Tomorrow at 2 p.m. at our house. Perfect. See you then. Zara put her phone away and started her car. Tomorrow, Brandon was going to tell her everything she needed to destroy him in court. He just didn't know it yet. The next morning, Zara met Gabriel at his office to prepare for the confrontation with Brandon. Gabriel's assistant, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia, helped Zara test the recording device that would be hidden under her blouse. It's smaller than I expected, Zara said, looking at the tiny microphone and transmitter. Technology has come a long way, Gabriel replied. This will record everything clearly, and it also transmits to a receiver I'll have parked outside your house. If anything goes wrong, I'll be right there. Patricia adjusted the microphone placement. The key is to act natural. Don't touch the area where it's hidden, and try not to wear anything that will rub against it and create noise. Gabriel handed Zara a list of questions. These are suggestions, but don't feel like you have to ask them in order. The most important thing is to get him talking about the money transfers and his plans with Natalie. Zara reviewed the list. What if he doesn't admit to anything? He will. From everything you've told me about his personality, he won't be able to resist explaining how clever he's been. Especially if he thinks you don't understand what he did. At 1:30 p.m., Zara pulled into the driveway of the house she'd shared with Brandon for 3 years. It felt strange being back after several days away. The yard still showed signs of the divorce party. Some decorations had blown into the bushes, and there were stains on the concrete where drinks had been spilled. Brandon's car was already there, along with a red BMW that Zara recognized as Natalie's. Her stomach tightened. She'd been expecting to face Brandon alone. Zara texted Gabriel, Natalie is here too. Should I still go through with this? Gabriel's response came back quickly, yes. Even better. If she's involved in the conversation, we might get evidence against both of them. Zara took a deep breath and walked to the front door. Before she could knock, Brandon opened it with a big smile. Zara, I'm so glad you're ready to talk about this rationally. He stepped aside to let her in. Natalie's here too. I hope that's okay. She's been helping me understand the legal paperwork. Of course, Zara said, trying to sound defeated rather than angry. I just want to understand what I'm signing. They walked into the living room, where Natalie was sitting on the couch with several manila folders spread out in front of her. She looked up with a sympathetic expression that made Zara want to scream. Zara, honey, I know this must be so hard for you, Natalie said. But I think once you understand how generous Brandon is being, you'll see that this is really the best outcome for everyone. Generous? Zara asked, sitting down across from them. Brandon pulled out the same papers he tried to get her to sign at the party. I've been thinking about our conversation, and I realize I didn't explain things clearly. Let me walk you through what everything means. For the next 20 minutes, Brandon explained how he'd calculated the asset division. He spoke to Zara like she was a child who didn't understand money, using simple words and a patronizing tone that she'd somehow never noticed during their marriage. The house is worth about $300,000, he said. But I've been paying the mortgage for the past 2 years while your business was getting started, so really I have more equity in it than you do. That was completely false. Zara had put down the $60,000 down payment and had been making half the mortgage payments from day one. But she nodded like she didn't know any better. And the cars. Well, my truck is necessary for work and your car is almost paid off, so it makes sense for me to take over those payments and you to get something more affordable. Another lie. Zara's car was completely paid off, and she'd been the one making Brandon's truck payments for the past 6 months. What about our savings accounts? Zara asked innocently. Brandon and Natalie exchanged a quick glance that the recording device definitely picked up. That's a little complicated, Brandon said. I've been managing our investments and moving money around to get better returns. Some of it is tied up in business opportunities right now. What kind of business opportunities? Well, Natalie has this great marketing company, Brandon said, warming to the topic. I invested some of our money in her business because the returns are incredible. Much better than just letting it sit in a regular savings account. How much money? Zara asked. Not that much. Maybe $50,000 total over the past few months. Zara knew it was closer to $200,000, but she acted impressed rather than suspicious. Wow, that's a lot. Is it making good returns? Natalie leaned forward enthusiastically. Oh yes. My marketing company has been so successful. We're getting contracts with major brands, international clients. In fact, Brandon and I are thinking about expanding overseas. Overseas. There are incredible opportunities in South America, Brandon said. The marketing industry is booming there, and with Natalie's expertise and my real estate connections, we could really build something amazing. Are you planning to move there? Maybe eventually, Brandon said. But that's way in the future. Right now, we just want to get this divorce finalized so we can all move on with our lives. He pushed the papers toward Zara again. These documents just formalize everything we've talked about. You get a fresh start, I take care of the business investments and property management, and we don't have to involve lawyers or make this complicated. What if I wanted to get a lawyer? Zara asked. Brandon's expression tightened slightly. Zara, lawyers are expensive and they just complicate things. Plus, if we involve lawyers, they'll want to audit all our finances, which could tie up our money for months. It's much better to keep this between us. Brandon's right, Natalie added. Lawyers just create drama and run up bills. This way is cleaner and faster. And what happens if I find out later that there was more money than you told me about? Brandon laughed. Zara, come on. We've been married for 5 years. You know everything about our finances. There aren't any secret accounts or hidden money. Zara nodded like that made sense to her. Okay. And the investment in Natalie's company, when will that money come back? Well, it's tied up for a while, Natalie said quickly. Business investments take time to mature. But don't worry, Brandon explained that the money was mostly his contribution to the marriage anyway. Actually, Brandon said, clearly feeling confident now, I've been supporting you and your business for years. The money I invested with Natalie was really my money that I earned from my real estate work. Zara almost laughed. Brandon's real estate business had been barely breaking even for the past 2 years. Her consulting business had been funding their lifestyle entirely. I just want to make sure I understand, Zara said. You're saying that most of the money in our joint accounts came from your work? Absolutely. Your consulting business has been more of a hobby than a real income source. Zara bit her tongue. Her hobby had grossed over $180,000 the previous year. And you invested our money, your money in Natalie's marketing company because it was a good opportunity? One of the best investment opportunities I've ever seen, Brandon said proudly. Natalie's company is going to be huge. I'm actually thinking about leaving real estate entirely and joining her business full-time. What about your current real estate clients? They'll understand. Business is business. Zara wondered if Brandon's clients would understand when they found out their project fees had been funneled into his girlfriend's fake company. After another 30 minutes of conversation, Zara had everything she needed. Brandon and Natalie had not only admitted to the financial fraud, but they'd also revealed their plans to flee the country and abandon Brandon's clients. I think I understand everything now, Zara said, standing up. Can I take these papers with me to look over one more time? Of course, Brandon said, clearly relieved. Take your time. But remember, the sooner we finalize this, the sooner we can all move forward. As Zara walked to her car, she felt like she was walking on air. Gabriel was going to be amazed when he heard this recording. Her phone buzzed with a text from Brandon before she even left the driveway. Thanks for being so mature about everything. I knew you'd understand once I explained it properly. Zara typed back, I'm still processing it all, but I think you're right that keeping things simple is better. What Brandon didn't know was that Zara had just given Gabriel everything he needed to not only win the divorce case, but also to pursue criminal charges that could put both Brandon and Natalie in prison. Simple was definitely not what was about to happen. Gabriel's office was buzzing with activity when Zara arrived the next morning. Patricia was transcribing the recording from Zara's meeting with Brandon and Natalie, while Gabriel himself was on the phone with what sounded like a prosecutor. That was the district attorney's office, Gabriel said, hanging up. They're very interested in this case. Financial fraud involving multiple victims and a fake business entity. This is exactly the kind of white-collar crime they want to prosecute. Zara sat down and accepted the coffee Patricia offered her. How strong is our case? With this recording? It's bulletproof. Gabriel played back a section where Brandon clearly admitted to moving money without Zara's knowledge. He essentially confessed to embezzlement and conspiracy to commit fraud. What about Natalie? She admitted to creating a fake business and knowingly accepting stolen money. Plus, her comments about international expansion suggest she was planning to help Brandon flee the country with the stolen funds. Patricia looked up from her computer. I finished transcribing the recording. Do you want me to highlight the most incriminating sections? Yes, and prepare copies for the DA's office. Gabriel turned back to Zara. Now comes the tricky part. We need to coordinate the civil divorce case with the criminal investigation. What does that mean? It means we need to time everything perfectly. If we file the divorce paperwork too early, Brandon might realize what's happening and try to hide more evidence or leave the country. But if we wait too long, he might move more money or disappear. Gabriel pulled out a calendar. Here's what I think we should do. Today is Friday. I want you to call Brandon and tell him you're ready to sign the papers. Ask to meet with him on Monday. Won't he be suspicious that I'm ready so quickly? Not if you play it right. Tell him you've been thinking about everything he said, and you realize he's right about keeping things simple. Act like you're grateful for his generosity. Zara felt her stomach turn at the thought of praising Brandon's generosity, but she understood the strategy. On Monday morning, I'll file an emergency motion to freeze all assets and request a temporary restraining order preventing Brandon from leaving the state. The DA will simultaneously execute search warrants for Brandon's office, his computer, and Natalie's business records. And then we let them panic and see what else they reveal. People who think they're cornered often make desperate mistakes that give us even more evidence. Gabriel's phone rang and he glanced at the caller ID. It's the DA's office. Patricia, can you walk Zara through the timeline while I take this? Patricia pulled out a detailed schedule. Monday will be busy. The asset freeze needs to happen before Brandon gets to his office, so Gabriel will file the paperwork at 8 a.m. when the courthouse opens. The search warrants will be executed at 9 a.m. What about my meeting with Brandon? That needs to happen before any of the legal action, so we're thinking Sunday evening. By the time Brandon realizes what's happening on Monday, we'll already have his final confession on tape. Gabriel finished his phone call and rejoined them. Good news. The DA wants to move forward immediately. They're assigning 2 detectives to the case, and they'll have the search warrants ready by end of business today. This is really happening, Zara said, feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness. It's really happening. But Zara, I need you to understand that once we set this in motion, there's no going back. Brandon and Natalie are going to face serious criminal charges. Are you prepared for that? Zara thought about the humiliation of the divorce party, the months of lies and theft, and the way Brandon had spoken to her like she was stupid during their recorded conversation. I'm prepared. Good. Then let's call Brandon and set up Sunday's meeting. Zara dialed Brandon's number on speakerphone so Gabriel could hear both sides of the conversation. Zara, I was hoping you'd call. Have you decided about the paperwork? I have. You were right about keeping things simple. I don't want to involve lawyers or make this complicated. That's great to hear. When do you want to meet? Would Sunday evening work? Maybe around 7 p.m.? I'd like to sign everything and get this finished. Perfect. Should we meet at the house again? Actually, could we meet somewhere neutral? All of this has been emotionally difficult, and I think it would be easier for me somewhere that doesn't have so many memories. Brandon paused for a moment. Sure, that makes sense. How about that cafe downtown where we had our first date? Seems fitting in a way. Zara felt sick at the suggestion, but she agreed. That works. Should I bring anything besides the signed papers? Just yourself. And Zara? I really appreciate how mature you're being about this. I know it can't be easy. After they hung up, Gabriel was already making notes. A public place is actually better for recording. Less chance of interference and more witnesses if anything goes wrong. Do you think anything will go wrong? No. Brandon thinks he's won. He'll be relaxed and confident, which means he'll probably say even more incriminating things than he did yesterday. Gabriel handed Zara a new recording device, smaller than the previous one. This one has a longer battery life and better sound quality. Patricia will brief you on how to use it. What should I try to get him to admit to on Sunday? Everything. The fake business, the stolen client money, the plans to leave the country. If you can get him to explain the whole scheme from beginning to end, it will make the prosecutor's job much easier. Zara spent the rest of Friday afternoon practicing with the recording device and reviewing her strategy with Gabriel. They role-played different scenarios, with Gabriel playing Brandon and coaching Zara on how to ask questions that would encourage detailed confessions. "Remember, he thinks you're not very smart about business," Gabriel said. "Use that. Ask him to explain things multiple times. Act impressed by how clever he's been. I think I can manage that. One more thing. On Sunday night, after you get everything recorded, you need to act like you're completely convinced by his plan. Thank him for protecting you from the complexities of the divorce. Make him feel like he's completely won." "Why?" "Because on Monday morning, when the police show up at his office, we want him to be completely caught off guard. If he suspects anything on Sunday night, he might try to run or destroy evidence." As Zara drove home to Simone's apartment, she felt the weight of what was about to happen. By Monday afternoon, Brandon's life would be completely destroyed. His business would be exposed as fraudulent, his assets would be frozen, and he would likely be facing years in prison. A year ago she would have felt sorry for him. But now, after months of lies and the humiliation of the divorce party, she felt only a cold satisfaction. Brandon had underestimated her for the last time. Sunday evening arrived with unexpected rain, which seemed fitting for what Zara was about to do. She sat in her car outside the cafe where she and Brandon had their first date 5 years ago, watching him through the window. He was already there, sitting at their old table, looking relaxed and confident. The recording device felt warm against her skin, and she could hear Gabriel's voice through the tiny earpiece he'd insisted she wear. "I'm parked across the street. You're going to do great." Zara took a deep breath and walked into the cafe. Brandon stood up and smiled when he saw her, even giving her a brief hug that made her skin crawl. "You look good," he said as they sat down. "Rested. I think this whole thing has been harder on you than you wanted to admit." "I've been doing a lot of thinking," Zara replied. "About us, about the marriage, about what you said the other day. And I think you're right. I've been making this more complicated than it needs to be." Brandon's smile grew wider. "I'm glad you see it that way. I know I could have handled the announcement better, but sometimes it's better to just rip the Band-Aid off, you know?" Zara nodded. The divorce party was definitely a surprise. Natalie's idea, actually. She thought it would help both of us see this as a positive new beginning rather than something sad. "Speaking of Natalie, I've been thinking about what you both said about her marketing company. It sounds like an amazing opportunity." "Oh, it is. You should see the contracts she's been getting. Major international clients, revenue projections that are off the charts." "How exactly does the business work?" Brandon leaned forward, clearly excited to explain. "It's brilliant, really. Companies pay Sunset Development for social media marketing campaigns, but instead of spending money on traditional advertising, Natalie uses her influence to promote the brands directly to her followers." "That's smart. And you said you invested our savings in the company?" "About $200,000 over the past 6 months. Best investment I've ever made." Zara pretended to be impressed while feeling sick that he was finally admitting to the full amount. "Where did that money come from exactly?" "Well, mostly from our joint accounts, but also from some of my real estate clients. They've been paying extra fees for marketing services, which I've been routing through Sunset Development." "Your clients are paying Natalie's company for marketing?" "They think they are. But really they're just funding our expansion plans." Brandon laughed. "Some of them don't even realize how much they're paying in fees. I just add the marketing costs to their project budgets." Gabriel's voice crackled through Zara's earpiece. "That's confession to defrauding his clients." "Perfect. That sounds complicated," Zara said. "What happens when your clients want to see results from the marketing campaigns?" "By the time they start asking questions, Natalie and I will be in South America setting up the international branch of the business. The beauty of it is that once we're established overseas, we can legitimize everything and pay back the initial investments." "You're really planning to move to South America?" "Not permanently. Think of it as an extended business trip. We'll probably base operations in Argentina or Chile for a year or two while we build the client base." Zara felt her anger rising, but she kept her voice level. "What about the divorce? Can we finalize everything if you're out of the country?" "That's the beauty of this whole plan. Once you sign these papers, everything is settled. You get a clean break, and I get the freedom to pursue this business opportunity without being tied down by community property laws." Brandon pulled out the same manila envelope from the divorce party. "I brought fresh copies of everything just in case the ones from last week got damaged." Zara took the papers and pretended to review them carefully. This still gives you the house, both cars, and access to all our accounts? Right. But remember, most of that money is already invested in Sunset Development anyway. You're basically just signing away your rights to business assets that are tied up in international investments. And I don't get any share of those investments? Zara, come on. You don't know anything about international business or marketing. These investments require constant management and oversight. It's better for you to take a clean settlement now than to get involved in something you don't understand. Gabriel's voice, he's admitting to stealing marital assets. This is exactly what we need. I guess that makes sense, Zara said. You've always been better with the business side of things. Exactly. And this way, you can focus on your consulting work without worrying about complex financial issues. Brandon pulled out a pen, the same gold pen from the anniversary party. If you're ready, we can sign everything tonight and put this behind us. Zara took the pen and looked down at the signature line. For a moment, she thought about all the years she'd spent supporting Brandon's dreams, working late nights to fund his business ventures, and believing that they were building something together. Now she knew that he'd been planning to abandon her for months, stealing money that she'd earned to fund his escape with another woman. Before I sign, she said, I just want to make sure I understand the timeline. When are you planning to leave for South America? Probably within the next month. Natalie has some business meetings lined up, and we want to establish the company before the end of the year for tax purposes. And the money that's already invested in Sunset Development, that's definitely tied up for a long time? At least 2 years, maybe longer. International business takes time to develop. Zara nodded and signed the papers with a flourish. There. I hope everything works out for you and Natalie. Brandon's relief was visible. Thank you, Zara. I know this wasn't easy, but I really think this is the best outcome for both of us. I agree. And Brandon? Thank you for explaining everything so clearly. I feel much better knowing that the money is going toward a real business opportunity instead of just sitting in savings accounts. Of course. I wanted to make sure you understood that this isn't about greed or selfishness. It's about building something bigger than what either of us could accomplish alone. As they said goodbye outside the cafe, Brandon actually hugged her again. I'm proud of how you've handled this, Zara. A lot of women would have made this much more difficult. I just want us both to be happy, Zara replied. What Brandon didn't know was that Zara had just signed the papers with the same disappearing ink pen she'd used at the divorce party. By tomorrow morning, the documents would be blank again. More importantly, she now had a recording of Brandon admitting to embezzling money from their joint accounts, defrauding his business clients, and planning to flee the country with the stolen funds. As Zara drove away from the cafe, Gabriel's voice came through her earpiece. Outstanding work. Tomorrow morning is going to be very interesting for Brandon. I almost feel sorry for him, Zara said. Don't. He made his choices. Tomorrow he gets to face the consequences. Zara pulled out her phone and sent Brandon one final text. Thank you for everything tonight. I'm looking forward to moving on with my life. His response came back within minutes. Me too. New beginnings for both of us. Zara smiled grimly. Brandon had no idea how right he was about new beginnings. His new beginning would start with handcuffs. Monday morning arrived bright and clear, the rain from the previous evening having washed the city clean. Zara sat in Gabriel's office at 7:45 a.m., watching him make final preparations for what he'd started calling Operation Brandon. The asset freeze paperwork is ready to file as soon as the courthouse opens, Gabriel said, checking his watch. The DA's team is in position to execute search warrants at 9 a.m. sharp. What about Brandon? Does he suspect anything? According to his social media, he posted a picture of himself and Natalie having breakfast this morning with the caption, Monday Motivation. So no, I don't think he has any idea what's coming. At exactly 8 a.m. Gabriel's phone rang. Asset freeze is filed and approved, he announced after hanging up. As of this moment, Brandon can't access any joint accounts, can't sell any property, and can't leave the state without court permission. Zara felt a surge of satisfaction. How long before he finds out? Probably when he tries to access his bank account or when the police arrive at his office. Whichever comes first. At 8:30 Gabriel's phone rang again. This time it was Detective Rodriguez from the Financial Crimes Unit. We're in position outside Brandon's office building, the detective reported. Natalie Rivera is also here. Looks like they're working together this morning. Perfect timing, Gabriel replied. You have the recording and transcripts? Everything's ready. We'll move in at 9 a.m. as planned. Gabriel hung up and turned to Zara. This is it. Are you ready to watch your husband's world fall apart? I've been ready for weeks. At exactly 9 a.m., Gabriel's phone rang for the third time. Detective Rodriguez's voice was excited. We're inside. Brandon looked like he'd seen a ghost when we showed him the search warrant. He keeps asking if this is some kind of mistake. Any resistance? None from Brandon. Natalie tried to delete files from her laptop, but our tech specialist stopped her. She's been read her rights. Gabriel put the phone on speaker so Zara could hear the updates. We found boxes of fake invoices and client contracts, Detective Rodriguez continued. Looks like they were running multiple scams simultaneously. This is going to be bigger than we thought. How much bigger? We're finding evidence of fraudulent billing to at least 12 different clients, plus the money laundering through the fake business. We're probably looking at over $400,000 in total fraud. Zara felt her eyes widen. She'd known about the $200,000 stolen from their joint accounts, but Brandon had been stealing much more than that. There's something else, the detective said. We found plane tickets. Brandon and Natalie were scheduled to fly to Argentina tomorrow morning. Tomorrow? Gabriel looked at Zara with amazement. If you hadn't acted when you did, they would have been gone. The updates continued throughout the morning. By 10 a.m., both Brandon and Natalie were in custody. By 11 a.m., the DA's office had frozen all accounts connected to Sunset Development and issued warrants for additional searches. At noon, Gabriel's assistant Patricia burst into the office with her laptop. You need to see this, she said, pulling up a local news website. The headline read, Local real estate developer arrested for financial fraud. Below it was a photo of Brandon being led away in handcuffs, with Natalie visible in the background also in custody. They're calling it one of the largest white-collar crime cases in the city this year, Patricia said, scrolling through the article. The DA's office is saying it involves multiple victims and international money laundering. Zara read over Patricia's shoulder. The article mentioned that authorities had been assisted by detailed financial records provided by a whistleblower close to the case. That's you, Gabriel said with a grin. You're officially a whistleblower now. Gabriel's phone rang again. This time it was the DA himself. Mr. Santos, I wanted to personally thank you and your client. This case is going to send a strong message about financial fraud in our jurisdiction. What are the charges? Gabriel asked. Multiple counts of embezzlement, fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud and money laundering. We're also looking at charges related to planning to flee the country with stolen funds. What kind of sentences are we looking at? If convicted on all counts, they're each looking at 8-12 years in federal prison, plus restitution to all victims. After the DA hung up, Gabriel turned to Zara with a serious expression. There's something else we need to discuss. With Brandon in custody and all his assets frozen, the divorce becomes much simpler. What do you mean? Brandon won't be able to afford legal representation for the divorce case. His assets are frozen pending the criminal trial, and any money that isn't stolen will need to go toward restitution for his victims. Gabriel pulled out a new set of papers. This means we can file for divorce on your terms. You'll get the house, your car, any legitimate assets, and you'll be protected from any of Brandon's debts or legal liabilities. And what about the money he stole from our joint accounts? That will be recovered as part of the criminal restitution process. You'll get every penny back plus interest. Zara felt like she was in a dream. 3 weeks ago, she'd come home to a surprise divorce party where Brandon tried to steal everything from her. Now he was in jail, facing a decade in prison, and she was going to get everything back plus her freedom. There's one more thing, Gabriel said, pulling out his phone. I got a call from a reporter at Channel 7 News. They want to interview you about the case. Do I have to? No, but it might be good for you professionally. This story is going to be big news, and being known as the woman who uncovered a major fraud case could be great for your consulting business. Zara thought about it for a moment. Can I think about it? Of course. But Zara, I want you to know that what you did took incredible courage. A lot of people would have just signed those papers and walked away. I couldn't let him win. Not after everything. Gabriel's expression was admiring. Well, he definitely didn't win. In fact, I'd say this is one of the most complete victories I've ever seen in a divorce case. As Zara left Gabriel's office that afternoon, she felt lighter than she had in years. Brandon was in jail where he belonged. Natalie was facing the same charges for her role in the fraud. Their victims would get their money back. And Zara was free to build the life she'd always wanted, without a man who'd never appreciated what he had. Her phone buzzed with a text from Simone. Saw the news. Are you okay? Are you safe? Are you celebrating? Zara typed back, all of the above. Come over tonight. We have a lot to celebrate. For the first time in months, Zara Thompson was genuinely excited about her future. 6 months after Brandon's arrest, Zara sat in her new downtown office, reviewing proposals for her rapidly expanding consulting business. The publicity from the fraud case had brought her more clients than she could handle, and she'd hired 3 additional consultants to help manage the workload. Her assistant knocked on the door. Zara? Gabriel Santos is here for your lunch meeting. Zara smiled. Over the past few months, Gabriel had become much more than just her attorney. What had started as a professional relationship built on shared outrage over Brandon's crimes had slowly developed into something deeper. How's my favorite whistleblower? Gabriel asked as he entered her office, carrying takeout bags from their favorite restaurant. Busy. Happy. Rich, Zara replied, clearing space on her desk for their lunch. The Channel 7 interview brought in 4 new clients just this week. Gabriel pulled out containers of Thai food and settled into the chair across from her desk. Speaking of the case, I have updates on Brandon and Natalie. Good news or bad news? Depends on your perspective. They both pled guilty to avoid trial. Brandon got 8 years in federal prison plus full restitution to all victims. Natalie got 6 years plus community service. Zara felt a mixture of satisfaction and relief. And the money? You'll have everything back within the next month, including interest and penalties. Plus, you're getting half of the sale proceeds from Brandon's business assets. How much total? Close to $350,000. More than enough to fund your business expansion plans. Zara shook her head in amazement. A year ago, I thought I was going to lose everything. Now I'm getting more money back than Brandon ever actually stole. That's what happens when crime doesn't pay, Gabriel said with a grin. The federal restitution laws are designed to make victims whole, plus compensate them for the time and stress of recovery. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes before Gabriel brought up the topic Zara had been expecting. I have something else to tell you, he said. I got a job offer. Zara's stomach tightened. Where? A big firm in Chicago. Corporate law, white-collar crime defense. It's a great opportunity. Are you going to take it? Gabriel was quiet for a long moment. That depends. On what? On whether there's a reason for me to stay here. Zara looked at him across her desk, this man who had helped her get justice and rebuild her life. Over the past few months, they'd grown close in ways that had nothing to do with legal strategy. Gabriel was kind, intelligent, and completely different from Brandon in every way that mattered. Gabriel, I care about you. But I need to be honest about something. What's that? 6 months ago, I was married to a man who lied to me, stole from me, and humiliated me in front of dozens of people. I'm not sure I'm ready to make any big decisions about my personal life yet. Gabriel nodded slowly. I understand. But can I ask you something? Of course. Are you not ready because you need more time to heal, or are you not ready because you don't trust me? Zara considered the question carefully. I think I need more time to trust myself. I was married to Brandon for 5 years and never saw who he really was. I'm worried about my judgment when it comes to men. That's fair. But Zara, you did see who Brandon really was. That's why you gathered evidence instead of just signing his papers. That's why you fought back instead of letting him steal from you. Gabriel reached across the desk and took her hand. Your judgment isn't broken. Your husband was just really good at lying. So what are you saying? I'm saying that I'll turn down the Chicago job if you'll give us a chance to see where this goes. No pressure, no expectations. Just 2 people who like each other spending time together. Zara felt her walls starting to come down. What if it doesn't work out? Then it doesn't work out. But what if it does? That evening, Zara met Simone for dinner at their favorite wine bar. She told her best friend about Gabriel's job offer and his proposal to stay. Are you crazy? Simone said after hearing the whole story. The man helped you take down your fraudster husband. He's gorgeous, he's successful, and he wants to turn down a dream job to stay with you. What exactly are you waiting for? I'm scared, Zara admitted. What if I'm wrong about him? What if he turns out to be another Brandon? Honey, Gabriel is nothing like Brandon. Brandon was selfish, dishonest, and cruel. Gabriel literally spent months helping you get justice without asking for anything in return. Simone leaned forward. Besides, do you want to spend the rest of your life alone because your ex-husband was a terrible person? No, but nothing. You deserve to be happy. You deserve to be with someone who sees how amazing you are. Zara thought about the past year. The humiliation of the divorce party, the fear of discovering Brandon's crimes, the satisfaction of seeing justice served. but also the long conversations with Gabriel, the way he made her laugh, and how safe she felt when she was with him. "You're right," she said finally. "I'm being an idiot." "Yes, you are. Now go call that man and tell him to turn down the Chicago job." The next morning, Zara called Gabriel before she could change her mind. "I have an answer to your question," she said when he picked up. "I'm listening." Stay here and let's see what happens between us." She could hear Gabriel's smile through the phone. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." "But Gabriel?" "Yeah. No more surprise parties. I've had enough surprises to last a lifetime." Gabriel laughed. "Deal. How about we start with a regular dinner date like normal people?" "I'd like that." As Zara hung up the phone, she felt something she hadn't felt in years, excited about her future. Not just her business or her financial security, but her personal life too. Brandon had tried to destroy her, but instead he'd freed her to build something better than she'd ever imagined. And this time she was building it with someone who actually deserved her. 1 year after the divorce party that changed everything, Zara stood in the ballroom of the downtown Marriott, watching guests arrive for a very different kind of celebration. This party was her idea, planned by her and thrown for all the right reasons. "I can't believe you booked the same hotel where Brandon had his business conferences," Simone said, adjusting Zara's necklace. "Are you sure you want to do this here?" "I'm positive. I want to reclaim this space with good memories instead of bad ones." Tonight was the launch party for Zara's expanded consulting firm, now called Thompson & Associates. Her business had grown from a one-woman operation to a team of 8 consultants specializing in helping companies recover from financial fraud and mismanagement. "How many people are coming?" Simone asked. "About 150. Clients, colleagues, friends, family." Zara smiled. "And some very special guests." As if on cue, Gabriel appeared at her side, looking handsome in a navy suit that matched Zara's dress perfectly. "The guests of honor just arrived," he said, nodding toward the entrance. Zara looked over to see Detective Rodriguez and several other members of the Financial Crimes Unit entering the ballroom. Behind them were Mr. and Mrs. Patterson, one of Brandon's former clients who had lost their life savings to his fake marketing schemes. Over the past year, Zara had done pro bono consulting work for all of Brandon's victims, helping them navigate the restitution process and rebuild their finances. Tonight was as much a celebration of their recovery as it was of her business success. "Ladies and gentlemen," the DJ announced, "please welcome your host, Zara Thompson." Zara took the microphone and looked out at the crowd of people who had supported her through the most difficult year of her life. "A year ago, I thought my life was falling apart," she began. "I came home expecting to celebrate my wedding anniversary and instead found a party celebrating the end of my marriage." The crowd was quiet, listening intently. "That night, I learned that my husband had been stealing money, lying about his business, and planning to leave the country with his girlfriend. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and completely powerless." Zara found Gabriel in the crowd and smiled. "But I also learned something else that night. I learned that I was stronger than I thought I was. I learned that I had skills and resources I'd never fully used. And I learned that sometimes when you think you're losing everything, you're actually being freed to build something better." The crowd began to murmur approvingly. "This past year, I've had the privilege of working with victims of financial fraud and helping them recover what was stolen from them. I've learned that my experience with Brandon wasn't unique. There are hundreds of people in our city alone who have been betrayed by people they trusted." Zara gestured toward the group of Brandon's former clients. "But I've also learned that recovery is possible. Justice is possible. And building something better from the ashes of betrayal is not just possible, it's powerful." The crowd broke into applause. "So tonight we're celebrating more than just a business expansion. We're celebrating the strength that comes from surviving betrayal. We're celebrating the justice that comes from fighting back against fraud. And we're celebrating the new beginnings that are possible when we refuse to let other people's crimes define our futures." As the applause died down, Gabriel stepped forward with a microphone of his own. "I hope Zara won't mind if I add something to her speech," he said, looking directly at her. Zara felt her heart start racing. This wasn't part of the plan. "A year ago, I met Zara when she walked into my office with a stack of evidence and a determination to get justice. I thought I was just taking on another divorce case." Gabriel moved closer to her. "What I didn't expect was to meet someone who would completely change my perspective on courage, intelligence, and integrity. Zara, you didn't just survive betrayal, you turned it into a mission to help other people." The crowd was completely silent now. "You've built an amazing business, you've helped dozens of families recover from fraud, and you've shown everyone who knows you what real strength looks like." Gabriel reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small blue box. So I have a question for you, and I figured I'd ask it in front of all these people who love and respect you. Zara gasped as Gabriel dropped to one knee. Zara Thompson, will you marry me? The ballroom erupted in cheers and applause. Zara looked down at Gabriel, this man who had helped her fight for justice and rebuild her life, and felt her eyes fill with tears of joy. Yes, she said loud enough for everyone to hear. Yes, absolutely yes. As Gabriel slipped the ring onto her finger, the crowd went wild. Zara could see Detective Rodriguez wiping his eyes, Mrs. Patterson crying happy tears, and Simone jumping up and down with excitement. I love you, Gabriel said as he stood up and kissed her. I love you too. As the party continued around them, Zara thought about how different this celebration was from the one Brandon had thrown a year ago. That party had been about humiliation and cruelty. This one was about love, success, and community. Later that evening, as guests were starting to leave, Detective Rodriguez approached Zara and Gabriel. I wanted you both to know that the Brandon Mitchell case has become a model for how we handle financial fraud investigations, he said. The evidence you gathered, Zara, was some of the most comprehensive I've ever seen from a civilian. What's Brandon doing now? Zara asked. Last I heard, he was working in the prison library and taking accounting classes. Apparently, he wants to help other inmates with their finances when he gets out. Gabriel laughed. That's either very ironic or completely appropriate. What about Natalie? She's in a minimum security facility in Texas. I heard she's teaching social media classes to other inmates. Her Instagram account has been dormant for obvious reasons. As the detective walked away, Zara looked around the nearly empty ballroom. A year ago, she'd been a woman whose husband wanted to divorce her and steal her money. Tonight, she was a successful business owner, engaged to a man who truly loved her, and recognized as someone who had made a real difference in her community. No regrets? Gabriel asked, following her gaze. About what? About any of it. The divorce, the investigation, taking Brandon down. Zara thought about the question seriously. I regret that I wasted 5 years with someone who didn't deserve me. But I don't regret anything that happened after I found out who he really was. Even the divorce party? Especially the divorce party. If Brandon hadn't been so arrogant and cruel, I might have just signed his papers and walked away. I never would have investigated his finances or discovered the fraud. Zara took Gabriel's hand and looked at her engagement ring sparkling under the ballroom lights. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you leads directly to the best thing that happens to you. In that case, Gabriel said, spinning her around the empty dance floor, I'm grateful for every terrible decision Brandon ever made. Me too. Because all of his terrible decisions led me to you. As they danced alone in the ballroom where Zara's new life had really begun, she thought about the signature that had changed everything. Brandon had thought he was getting her to sign away her future. Instead, she'd signed her name on the beginning of a completely different story. A story where she was the hero, not the victim. A story where love was real, success was earned, and justice was served. A story that was just beginning.